All right. For those of you here, welcome to the iOS workshop at ZotHacks, presented by Codepath. All right, so me and Mingja are going to be your instructors today. A little bit about myself. I'm a second-year computer science major here at UCI, and I actually was involved as a hacker in ZotHacks last year, so it's pretty cool to come back and be able to present a workshop.
Hi everyone, I'm Minja, CS major at UCI. We're both from Codepath, and so just really excited to do this workshop. I'm gonna go close my door real quick, but Ethan, carry on.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I just wanted to give a quick pitch about Codepath. So what is Codepath? Codepath is a nonprofit organization funded by the likes of Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Y Combinator, Andreessen Horowitz, aimed at providing no-cost coding education to underrepresented minorities in tech. And we actually have a really big opportunity for you guys. So as you can see, the UCI's Codepath cohort is offering iOS, Android, and cybersecurity classes in the winter quarter. So we are going to have an information session coming up. We're still wrapping up some of the details of that, and applications are coming out soon. So if anyone has any questions or about Codepath or the information sessions or applications or how it's run in general, please DM either me, Mingja, or Chase in Slack with your email if you want us to put you on like a list so we can send you information about when that stuff does come out. Yeah, again, if you're interested or have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And it is open to all UCI students with a fundamental knowledge of object-oriented programming. When Mingja and I took the class, we were like brand new at UCI, had no clue what we were doing in computer science. So like, I'd say if you're even in a computer science class, like if you're in 31, 32, and you just kind of know what you're doing, then you should be good. And there's a link there at codepath.org if you want to learn more about the organization. And let's go on to our workshop. So iOS development, I guess let's get right into it. So in Swift or Xcode, which is what you are going to be using to develop your iOS apps, there's really two main processes that can be broken down into what you need to do to complete an app. First is designing the layout, and second is writing the code. So I'll go into this a little bit more. Designing the layout, you're going to have something called a storyboard file, which you can see right here. And the storyboard file is kind of, you can picture it as like drag and drop. So there are some predefined sort of classes that are given to you by Apple that you can drag into the storyboard and sort of connect them with each other to give the overall like high level running of your application. That it's not going to really do anything. It's just kind of a blank template. But again, this is kind of the high level. And then what you want to do after that is create a file for each one of these screens or views. And then in there, you can kind of refine the implementation details, tell each screen like what it should do. And that's where you are really going to get into designing your app. Oh, oops, I went backwards to the end. Sorry about that. So again, I'm going to go into a very brief introduction of Xcode, and Mingja's going to kind of touch on this more, and you'll see how each thing is used as he gives his presentation. But just a brief overview. This is what Xcode is going to look like when you open it up. I don't know if you guys can see my pointer. Can you see my pointer, Mingja? Like my mouse?
I can.
Cool. So at the top here, this is the toolbar. Most applications have toolbars. I'm sure you guys would kind of realize what this does. Gives you some basic information about your project as a whole. Here, this iPhone 11 Pro Max, you can change what phone you want to view in the storyboard. So usually we recommend you to pick iPhone 8 because it just looks the simplest. Don't go to iPhone 11 as your default because that's a bigger screen than generally most people have, and it might be a little bit tougher to kind of lay out your application. So this is where you go in order to, I guess, pick what phone you want to develop your app on. And the way we are developing, it's going to work for every phone size, but this is just for your ease of use. There's also a play button here, which brings up the simulator. And the simulator is more or less a phone on your computer. So Minja also will demonstrate this later, but if you click on it, like a literal phone will pop up on your computer and show you how your app looks currently. The left side here, the navigator area, this should not come as a surprise to any of you. This is where you navigate through all your files. So nothing too special there, just like any other IDE. Bottom, also not really anything too surprising, is the debug area, the console. So you can see outputs here, you can debug here and whatnot. The right area here is the inspector area, which is kind of unique to iOS development, wherein you can click on some of the objects in your storyboard and you can change some of the details of those elements over here in the inspector area, and that will go ahead and apply it into your code. So you don't have to code everything by hand. For example, you can change like the alignment of some text boxes, stuff like that. You can also toggle some of these areas off. Let's say if you don't need the inspector area, you can come up here and press one of these buttons and hide it so you can have more room to see your storyboard as well as your code. And right here is the editor area. So depending on what file you're looking on, you're going to see different things here. For example, right now, you can see the user is looking at the storyboard. So in the storyboard, you can see sort of the overall like high level architecture of the application. You can't change any code here, but if you were to click on, for example, the app-delegate.swift, you would see actual Swift code there. So again, this editor area, if you are editing a Swift file, it's going to look like any other editor. Let's say if you're using VS Code, you can code there and whatnot. But if you're looking at the storyboard, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a graphical representation of what your app looks like, as well as like the subclasses and the classes that make up it. And what we are going to be discussing today is table views, as they are, I would honestly say, the most used sort of element in iOS development. And we're going to give just a very brief overview of what they do. We're going to give you some starter code, or I guess code that after Minja implements everything, we're going to give you that code. So if you want to use that as a basis for your project, you can. So what are table views? Table views are used to display rows of information, and you might recognize this from many of your favorite apps. For example, this is just, I guess, a very big display of information, and there's cells within it, and we'll go into more detail on that. Like I was saying before, if you look at how a table view is broken down, there is one big element called a UI table view, which is going to contain a bunch of UI table view cells. And these cells are, let's say like this is a cell, this is a cell. Each movie in here represents one cell, and you are going to be implementing how each cell looks. And yeah, so basically a UI table view is made up of a bunch of UI table view cells. And again, Minja will go into more detail on this later. Again, some notable apps that use table views: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Basically, any of the apps on your phone, I'd say a vast majority of them use table views. It's really used to get that like infinite dopamine scrolling stuff that a bunch of applications try to make today. For example, like Instagram, you just scroll through it mindlessly, hoping for a dopamine hit. Anything like that, apps that have infinite scrolling, those are all table views. And we're going to show you how to create table views. Again, here are some table views in the flesh. Contacts, if you look at the Contacts app, if you have an iPhone or even if you have an Android, they both use sort of the same concept. You can scroll through it. Let's say if you want to add filters on, I think this is Yelp or something like that. And Twitter is probably one of the most well-known table view implementations, I guess. And yeah, that's basically it for me. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Mingchen now, and he's going to step into the coding.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
Yep.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, I guess I'm sharing my entire screen. Okay. So go ahead and open up Xcode. I think we mentioned that as a prereq for coming to this workshop. You guys should have Xcode downloaded, and I think the screen should look something like this. Well, my desktop is a little bit messy, but just disregard that for now. So, and I can't see the chat anymore, so hopefully
I can answer questions.
Ethan can field questions and stop me if anything is up. All right. So first thing we're going to do on Xcode is actually click on create a new Xcode project, which is this button right here. And then that will take us to a screen that looks something like this. And we have a bunch of different sort of project types that we can choose from. We're going to go with single view app. And in my experience, I've only ever built things using single view apps. They have stuff like game, augmented reality app that makes stuff easier for you. But I think most people will be using this one. And that's what we're going to be using for the workshop today.
I wanted to bring up something really quick. If you fall behind on some of the coding, first of all, feel free to ask in chat and we'll try to catch you up. But there's also going to be an implementation of the overall app that's going to be given to you. I'm not sure where. Ninja, do you know where hackers can access that?
Let me actually link that. I think I have it open right now. Yeah.
Cool. But you are going to be given access to the app in completion that you can use as a basis for other apps. And
where am I?
So don't feel like stressed if you aren't able to catch up. We are going to have the entire code for you if you need. And yours just says app and not single view app.
Is my Xcode not on the latest version? I think if it's the one that's in the top.
Yeah, the first one should be the right option.
Okay, yours is. Yeah, I'm also on Mojave, which is interesting.
Oh.
But
I don't know if that would change anything though.
Yeah, I think if yours says app, go ahead and click on that. It should be the same thing, I want to say. Maybe I'm not up to date on the latest version of Xcode. But if you click that and then select next, just name it, whatever name you like. I'm just going to go with, let's see, TableView or it's workshop demo, something like that. Make sure your language is Swift, user interface is storyboard, and then you don't have to check any of the 3 checkboxes that are below that. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to click next. Save it somewhere, wherever you want to save your coding projects on your laptop is fine, and then just hit create. All right, so the project is finished loading. This is kind of like a template project that Xcode has set up for you. And then just to recap some stuff real quick, like Ethan mentioned earlier, all your files for the project are going to be on the left-hand side, right? And then this is where we're going to be navigating from file to file, kind of. So first, I'm going to click on main.storyboard. And it's called main.storyboard, and it really does look like a storyboard. So once my thing loads, which may take a couple seconds, you'll see kind of a phone screen in the middle of your display window. And that's where we're going to be dragging stuff on and making our app look nice and putting all the content in our app. Yep. So this is what it looks like. And here, just going to point out something real quick. It says view as, and mine is the iPhone 11 right now. I'm not sure what the default one is, but if you change it to, if you go here and click on device, you have a bunch of different iPhones to choose from. And this is whatever sort of iPhone you're going to be seeing in your main display window. I like going with 8. iPhone 11 and all the later generations are a little bit wonky in terms of, they have the notch and things like that. So iPhone 8 is kind of the simplest for me, but up to it's personal preference for most people. I'll give that a second to load. Yep. And just something else to point out before we start real quick. There are a lot of these icons that look like this. It's like kind of a window with a little bar on the side. So if I click this one, this will minimize that. If I click this, it will minimize this pane. And then I can also, hide and show a lot of these things. So play around with that. This is how you use Xcode and sort of customize the interface to your liking. Yep. So to get started real quick, I'm going to open the object library, which is done by clicking on this plus sign in the top right corner. And I'm going to, search bar is going to pop up. And I'm going to look up TableView. And once that pops up, I'm just going to click and drag TableView into the main window that I have here. And my Mac is really slow, so bear with me. It takes a couple seconds to load this stuff sometimes. Okay. And then once it's here, I want to drag this into the top right corner all the way as far as it will go. And then drag this corner into the, I'll scroll down a bit, into the bottom right as well. Or top left and bottom right. So just stretch across the entire screen. And it'll say table view. And another fun fact or thing to note is that here is where we can see an overview of all the stuff that's on our storyboard. And you can see that we have a view controller, which is a name for any screen that we have in our app. So you'll have multiple view controllers with more complex apps. And then we have a table view that's sort of hidden in this hierarchy of objects. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to minimize this. I don't want too much stuff cluttering up my my screen. And then I'm going to open the view controller Swift file that you can see on the left here, and split the screen in half with both this open as well as the file. And I can do that by holding down the Option key on my Mac and then just clicking on, oh, I messed it up already. Storyboard, holding Option and clicking on view controller will just pop it open in another pane. So this is what I want. Right. And hopefully I'm not going too fast. I can't see the chat. Hopin's screen sharing UI is not great. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hold down the control key with table view selected, right? And so you can do that here by clicking on this and make sure that the blue is highlighting table view. Or if that's hidden, I can just click on this and you can see like sort of an outline around it. That will let me know that it's selected. Right? I'm going to hold the control key and then drag it into this file. And you can sort of move it around, but I like putting it right below class view controller. And then we'll have a pop-up sort of window that appears. And it should be a connection called outlet, object view controller, name. You can choose a name, but I'm going to call it table view. It's of type UI table view. It's weak. And if yours looks like this, I'll leave it up for like a couple more seconds, then you'll be good to go. So just to summarize real briefly what we're doing is we're connecting this table view that we just dragged onto our storyboard with the actual code so that our code will know that it exists. We're creating an outlet, and outlets, connect things. And so we're establishing this connection and making sure that they're linked so that we can use them together wherever we need to. Right. So I'm just going to click connect. Close this window. So this is what I have. We've got an outlet, weak variable, and then this dot means that there's an outlet and it's connected successfully. Right. And then what we're going to do next is I'm going to put my cursor right behind UI view controller, and I'm going to import import a couple more things so that view controller inherits from these. And I'm going to type in UI table view. Interesting. I'm waiting for it to autocorrect or autocomplete, but it doesn't look like it's doing it. So UI table view delegate. Yep. So UI table view delegate is going to be the first one. And my computer is slow, but Xcode is usually really good about, once you type in the first few letters. So UI table view delegate is the first one, and then UI table view data source is going to be the second one. So just add those two, separated by commas, on line 11. And then it's going to give me an error, which is actually what I wanted to do, because we are missing, after importing or after adding these two class names, I'm actually missing something. So if I click on this error to let me know what it's asking, it's asking if I want to add some protocol stubs to my code. And I'm going to click fix because I actually do. So just to, I guess, go through that one more time, in case that was too quick for anybody. It should pop up with an error on its own. Right? Hover over it, click on this, and then it'll ask me if I want to add protocol stubs. I do. And then that'll give me these two little chunks of code right here. And I like moving these to the bottom. I like it so that I have variables at the top of my screen and functions at the bottom. So I'm just going to copy and paste these in here. And then what this first one is, and you're going to need these every time you make a table view. This is just, it's necessary because of how Apple sets up the kind of the structure of developing certain things. And so you're always going to need to have one of these. And the first one, as you can see, is number of rows in section. So this will tell your table view how many rows it needs to sort of render. I'm just going to put in a placeholder number right here. So 50, for example. Maybe we have a table view with 50 rows. And then in here, we're going to type in let cell equals UI table view cell print cell. So the first one tells me how many rows to display, or how many rows exist in the table view. And the second one tells me what each row is going to look like. Is there going to be text? Are there going to be images? Here we're creating a very basic cell. And cells, like Ethan mentioned, are the building blocks of the table views. So each row is going to be a cell. These are both going to be placeholders. We will not be running this code, and we will change it later, but leaving these here for now. And then one more thing we need to do is we need to tell our app and Xcode that we want to use these to sort of get information about how we want to display our table view. So what I'm going to type in is delegate. Okay, it's not changing color. Okay, there we go. So tableview.delegate equals self, tableview.dataSource equals self. Just kind of connects these to the table view every time the view loads. So every time we open our app. Yeah, so I think everything should be good for now. Hopefully your code is not returning any major errors or anything. And then one thing we can add real quickly is actually tableview.reload. So this will ensure that each time the screen loads, you're going to be getting the most up-to-date refreshed data from your table view. Yeah. So if everyone's good on this file, I'm going to go back to main.storyboard. And we have a table view, but we're missing the rows, the individual cells. Right? So I'm going to click on the plus sign again real quick. And then look up table view cell. So it's going to be this one. And then I'm going to drag table view cell into my storyboard as well. So I'm just click and drag. There we go. And I just release. And a little cell is just going to pop up the top. Maybe make it a little bit larger. It's kind of small on my screen. Right? And then you can see that underneath table view, we have a little cell popping up. Right? And that's exactly what we wanted. Okay. And then yell at me if you have any questions or if you need me to slow down. Hopefully My buddy Ethan is taking care of all that in the chat. But,
Good for now.
all right. So next, I'm going to click on the iOS workshop demo folder, or whatever folder you have here, whatever you chose to call it. Right? I'm going to right click and then click on new file. And it brings up a bunch of different possible file options, right? But we're just going to be using Cocoa Touch class, which is the one in the top left. Right? So I have Cocoa Touch class selected, all right, and then I click next. This should be, we want it to be a subclass of UI TableView cell. And then the class name I'm going to make into, I'll call it student cell. And you guys can name it something different, but I'd recommend naming it the same thing that I'm naming it right now, so that later on we won't run into errors where you have the wrong names for certain things or inconsistencies that won't allow your code to run successfully. So again, student cell and UI table view cell. And we're going to be using this to just print out like a list of student names. It's like a class roster or something like that. So student cell is a pretty appropriate name. Language should be Swift. I don't think you guys are going to need to change that. And then I'm just going to hit next. Right? And the important thing is to make sure that you save it in the right folder. So you can see that this folder with my Swift files is right underneath this yellow folder right here. So that's exactly where I want it to be. If you save it in the wrong folder, you will probably run into issues with your code. So just make sure you're good on that. And we have a new file now. So going back to main.storyboard real quick. And again, sort of a theme that we're seeing is that we add code and we have things on our storyboard, but we need to know how to connect the two. Right? So I'm going to open up the inspector pane, which is the one on the right again. Going back to my storyboard, and I'm going to select my table view cell. And that can be done by clicking on the cell in the window or by clicking on table view cell on the left-hand side. This is a way to know that you're clicking the right thing for sure. And then we're going to add the name student cell in two places because that's the name that we chose to give to this cell specifically. Right? So the first one is going to be in this icon in the top right that looks like a driver's license. It's called the identity inspector. Currently, this field is not filled in, but I'm going to hit the drop down, and student cell should be in there if you did this correctly. So this one's right in the middle. 4 from the left and 4 from the right. Looks like a driver's license. And then just go ahead and select student cell from this drop down. Or type it in, it should autocomplete for you. And then after that, we're going to do the same thing one tab over. So go over to the one that looks like kind of like an arrow pointing downward or something. This is the attributes inspector.
Hey, Minji, could you slow down just a little bit?
And we have an identifier here. Yeah. All right. I'll go back and just hang out here for a second.
I have a quick question. Arthur asked, when did student cell get replaced? It was table view cell before. So could you go back and show him that really quickly?
Okay. I'm guessing that's when I was creating the file, right? So what I did was I was on this screen, right? Chose Cocoa Touch class. And then, so make sure that UI table view cell is the subclass that's selected here. And then I changed table view cell from here. I changed it from table view cell here to student cell. As you can see, this is the name of the class we're trying to create. And so I thought student cell would be a bit more appropriate. And so I'm on this screen where I can choose, sort of customize my new file. Right? I think this is what Arthur is probably referring to. And then if I hit next, I'm not going to create the same file again. But once you save it and create, then you will have, you'll see it pop up on the left side, right? This is our new file. And then what I just did is I just selected the cell, changed the name here to student cell, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So hopefully that answered the question. Wasn't sure which instance of student cell you're referring to.
So he's asking where is that renaming menu, and that is in the identity inspector on the right side of Xcode. Could you show him where to get to that?
Yeah. So currently I have this pane open on the right, but in case you hid everything earlier, like I was kind of doing, we have 3 buttons on the top, the left, middle, and right one, and then just tap this one, and then if it's hidden, it will show itself. So this is the inspector pane that I'm working with. And then within that inspector pane, you have a bunch of little icons here. And I'm on the one that looks like a driver's license right in the middle.
Yep, the cell inherits the class name exactly.
Yep.
And once again, if you guys get super lost, we do have the completed lab linked in the chat, so feel free to reference that as well. And this will be recorded, and you can go over and watch it as many times as you need.
And hopefully we should finish a little bit early, so we'll have time to field some questions at the end, I think.
Yep. I think you're good to carry on.
Yep. All right. So we've renamed it student cell here, right? We got to go to the tab that's one tab over to the right, attributes inspector. And then the second attribute here says identifier. And then we're going to rename it as well. This one's not going to autocomplete for you, but I'm going to call it student cell here. If you decided to name your cell something different, you should call it, you should refer to it by that name here as well. So you got to stay consistent. If you don't use the same name, you might run into a couple issues. Again, attributes inspector, 5th from the left, 3rd from the right. I'm just changing the second attribute from where it was blank before, and I'm naming it student cell. Okay. And then after that, let's add some text. Like I said, we're going to try and build a basic app that can display a list of student names. And in order for that to happen, we need to put text in our cells, which are currently empty. So I'm going to click on this plus sign again. And then the first one is going to be label. If label is not the first one, you can also type in label. Label is Xcode's name for sort of a text object. Right? I'm going to drag label onto somewhere in the middle of my cell. If it will load. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to just drop it somewhere in the middle of my cell, but you're going to want to move this wherever you dropped it into the top left corner. You can see these 2 guidelines, sort of the dotted lines coming up. And this is just to ensure that it will show up correctly, because we need to do a little bit more complex stuff later on if we wanted to work on different sizes, but this is an easy way to make sure that our label is going to show up correctly regardless of the screen size. And then I'm going to change this because label is a rather ugly name. It's a generic name they gave us, but let's just call this student name so that if someone in the future comes and looks at our code, they'll know, oh, hey, this is a student's name. I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to get caught up. And then, again, we just added a label, and it's not connected to any code. And so, as we've been doing several times before, we need to connect this to our code using an outlet. Right? And so, I'm going to click on studentcell.swift this time. Not just a normal click. I'm going to hold down the option key and then click on studentcell.swift. And then it's just going to split the screen and show this in another separate pane over here. Right? So if we have these open at the same time, we're going to do what we've been doing before. Holding down the control key after you've selected this label, and you can select it by either clicking on the label here, or if you want to make sure, I can see that student name has now appeared. L for label, and I'm going to select it with this blue highlight on this pane on the left here too. So holding down the control key again, like we've done a couple of times earlier, and then just drag student name into this cell. Right? And you see a blue line is going to appear. I can select where I want to put it. I'm going to insert the outlet right here. And so for some of you, it might not allow you to drag it over there. And hopefully that's not the case. But if that is, it means that you were inconsistent with your naming, or that when we were giving it an identifier or selecting it as type class of student cell, you messed up a little bit over there. So drop a question in the chat if it's not letting you drag it in there and drop it successfully. Right? And then I'm going to give a name to this label, maybe just student name label. And again, you can name yours something different from mine, but you just got to remain consistent later on, and I'll point that out to you guys when we get there. So outlet, type UI label, and then the name is student name .label or student name label. Yeah. So I'm going to hit connect. That's what our code looks like right now. Student cell is a very short file, only like 20-something lines. We just added an outlet here. Right? And this dot here means that it's connected successfully, somewhere on that cell on our storyboard. Right? I think what we're going to do next is go to viewcontroller.swift. And then we're going to get rid of all this placeholder text that we put initially. Right? So actually, before we do that, we got to create our list of students. Right? Like I said, this is going to be a kind of like class roster sort of thing. So we're just going to create an array. And that can be done by saying let students equal. Okay. Let is how we create constants. This is probably not going to be changed, so we chose to do this rather than using var. Okay. And I don't know what typical student names are, but I'm just going to put like 5 or 6 names in here. Okay. And obviously, with your app, you're probably not going to be wanting to hard code this stuff. This is just a demo to get you guys up and running. Usually we would have sort of a list or maybe a bunch of API calls or something that would return a massive, a bunch of objects, and then we can render them and display them correctly in our table view. But this is just for demoing purposes. And now that we have our data, mine is an array of 5 names. We can actually tell the table view how many rows we want, rather than the hard coding 50. I can say students.count, which will give me the length of the array of students, the number of elements in it that we want, which is ideal. Yeah. Okay, and then in this function, in which, if you guys don't remember, I said is the function where we control what we're going to display in each cell. Right now, it's just creating a very basic cell, a blank one, and just returning it. And we don't want that. Right? So I'm going to change this code a little bit. Instead of letting cell equal UI table view cell, I'm going to say let cell equal table view. Hopefully this autocompletes for me. This is a very long name. So TableView.deq reusable cell with identifier string, and it should be the first one that pops up, I'm guessing, for you guys. And then I'm just going to hit enter and let it autocomplete for me. So, and remember we gave our cell a name, right? It was student cell. We changed the identifier sort of text field so that we could refer to this by its name. Right? And then after that, we're going to add, we're going to get the student name from the list of students. And if any errors pop up, I'll fix them in a second. Just try to follow along, and then we will resolve the errors in a bit. So let student equal students index path.row. So this is pulling out an individual student from the students array based on the index, or the index of the cell that we're currently rendering, right, or trying to display. So once we have student, which is going to be a name, Bob, Joe, Paul, Ethan, Chase. Remember that label we created? In student.swift, we named it student name label, right? And we had an outlet, so it's connected there. And so we're going to be accessing that here. Do cell dot student name label. And then if you name your something different, it would be cell dot and then the name of that variable. Text. So what we just did is we went into cell, pulled up the label, and we're targeting the text specifically. And we're going to set it equal to the current name of the student that we're on. And it's giving me a bunch of errors. I thought it would actually let me fix it automatically here, but I guess it's not. So one thing we need to add back on line 31, where I said let cell equals this big long thing, is I have to cast this into the correct type of cell, which is student cell. So I'm going to add as exclamation point student cell. Weird. I thought Xcode used to fix that automatically for you, or at least recommend some fixes. Not anymore, apparently. But doing that should undeclared type student cell. I'm not sure why it's returning this error for me. Let's see. Yeah, this should not be causing me any issues, but we've basically reached the end of the coding portion. So let me try to run this and see if this error is going to resolve itself. And then here, I'm going to run. But when I say run, I mean I'm running it on the simulator. So we're going to have like a virtual iPhone on our laptop that's running, and we can see the app there. Make sure that you're selecting the right iPhone. I created mine on an 8, so I ideally want to run it on an 8, right? And you can change that by clicking on the left side. Let me give this a shot and try running it. Oh, okay. So the error just resolved itself. Looks like it's just Xcode being annoying for me again. And I think we should be done with the table view. If everything, if I didn't mess anything up, the simulator should run successfully, and then we will see what our final app looks like. Yeah. And I'm running on a 7-year-old MacBook right now, so you guys, your simulators might be done loading already, but hopefully you see a screen with your table view loaded successfully with several names, the names of the students that you put in your array, your list of students. And yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. And so if yours looks like that, then you're good to go. Let's see. Yeah, and about running it on an actual iPhone, there's some permission things you have to resolve. You got to go on your iPhone, navigate into settings and give yourself permission, sign off correctly on it or something like that. So I don't do it very often, but there are a couple of loops you have to jump through for that. All right. All right. So still waiting for my simulator to load. It is rather slow, but hopefully all our other attendees were able to get it to work. It's scrollable, and obviously right now it's pretty basic, right? We just have names, right? It's quite ugly. Not too many colors going on either. The goal of this workshop is to kind of give you guys a demo of how it works and a template that you guys can use to build much more complex table views in the future. Right? So if you want images, obviously there'd be a more sophisticated way of loading it. But it all comes down to, again, these two functions that we had, right? It asks us to fix stubs. And the key thing is that this one is always going to return the number of cells that we want. And this one, we're going to be customizing what each cell is going to look like, right? And so obviously, if you have images or anything else going on, you would set that up in here, right? Create more labels, create an image view, which is how we display images, connect that with an outlet to our code again, right? And then set it up all in this function.
I wanted to bring up, just in case you really want to get into like iOS development, I highly recommend go really deep into it. I kind of recommend to go the Swift UI route, as I've been playing with that quite a bit recently, and I do think it's a lot more intuitive than sort of just dragging and dropping and connecting and making outlets and all that stuff. So just a recommendation on my part. I do think Swift UI is more intuitive, and I think people are going to switch to it more in the future. So if you were to learn it from scratch right now, I'd recommend you to learn Swift UI over just the basic storyboard stuff that we are doing right now. But yeah, also if you guys have any questions, feel free to request to share and your audio or whatever. But other than that, we'll just stay in here for a couple more minutes and answer any questions if you guys have any.
Looks like I did go quite fast. We had to compress our normally hour and a half lesson into just under an hour for this one, and so did have to speed through it. But thanks for answering the questions, Ethan.
And that's what the completed project is for as well. So
yeah. And then one more thing that I want to mention that's just very annoying for people who want to get into iOS development is that in case you put a file in the wrong folder or you named it something else and you want to rename it. For example, if I name this variable table view, but I want to change it to like A, this would mess up my code. So renaming anything is generally a pretty bad idea. Or moving files around is a pretty bad idea in Xcode if that's all you're doing, just renaming it on the surface. And so in order to rename this, I actually have to right-click on it, refactor, rename, and then something will pop up that'll rename every instance of TableView so that I'm changing it, I'm going way deep into my code and changing it correctly. So if anything, if you have an error that you can't figure out, it's most likely because you're renaming something or you mess up an outlet and you're making another one, and now you have a bunch of random outlets hanging around in the background. So that's just one thing to note. All right.
I guess we can stay for a couple more minutes, but other than that, that's a wrap. They're called different things, Arthur. One is referring to the data source, and the other one is something else.
Yeah. So they both say table view, but you can tell kind of from the parameters that it takes in. Like one is number of rows in section, specifying that, and
It's basically overloading is what it is. So when you overload, yeah, with constructors. Yep.
yeah. There's a bit more complex stuff going on, but basically every time Xcode is loading a table view and trying to figure out how to load that correctly, it will like you'll have to implement those two functions at a bare minimum, and there's way more that you can use. Sort of like delegates the responsibility to those two functions, and then it uses that information to load the table view. Like if we didn't have one of those functions, your app would not even run. It would just return an error.
That's one of the annoying things of, I think, when beginners get into iOS, you see all these like arbitrary functions that people are implementing. You're like, oh, where did that even come from? Those are like the underlying, I guess, implementations of the classes that the iOS gives you that you do have to implement yourself. So sometimes it seems like it's coming out of thin air, which is one of my biggest qualms about iOS development. Everything seems so arbitrary. And you're like, why did you even do that? But yeah, that's something to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. And then you asked, is it equivalent to running a for loop? It's pretty close, I think. It kind of loops through everything and renders. But the thing is, we had that long, DQ reusable table view cell, or whatever it's called. And like Ethan said, it's like when you're scrolling through Instagram and you just have a billion posts loading, it would take a lot of memory, or I think RAM, for Apple to store all of that stuff constantly as it loads. So it's making it more efficient by only storing the cells that are upcoming or that are like that you just loaded. And so it's queuing and dequeuing them constantly and only ensuring that like the ones that appear on your screen are the ones that are loading. So I think if you scroll back up, it would dequeue the ones that are above it. If you scroll down, it would dequeue the ones that are below it. Something like that.
Yeah. Thanks for being our loyal viewer, Arthur.
Yeah, our most active chat participant.
Our only chat participant.
Yeah.
No worries, dude. Again, honestly, I'd recommend you to learn Swift UI. It's a lot more intuitive than this. If you've used CSS like Flex before, it's exactly like that, and there's no like connecting and blah blah blah. Yeah, Swift is kind of ugly.
Yeah.
Actually, though, we should have done it this year. But
yeah, Ethan, you should spearhead the.
Dude, I'm DMing Tim right now.
Yeah. Wow, our code is so clean now. I think Objective C was much worse actually. So, I guess Swift is already an improvement.
Dude, it's an improvement, but still everything's so. It's fine. I'm not gonna get fun anymore. Can confirm.
Yeah. I still see bits of it. Like you have some Swift features that use Objective C still, and I'm just like, what is this? Like,
it's like one big like jumble of code that makes it's like not laid out in any organized fashion at all. It's just like there, and I definitely do not want to learn that ever.
Damn. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm literally gonna DM Tim.
Wow.
I feel like that's definitely the way to go, though. It's a lot easier to implement. I think it's like more similar to all the other coding languages. Because right now, I think Swift and Xcode and iOS is sort of like in its own little corner. It's like not really comparable to anything. I've never used Android Studio or Kotlin or anything like that, so I don't know how similar it is. But yeah, exactly. SwiftUI is really new, so it's definitely not, maybe isn't really the play because they don't know how viable it will be long term. But from just using it just a little bit, I was messing around with it yesterday. I really do think it's the next thing. I think Swift is going to be the next Objective C. So we're going to look back at Swift and be like, what in the world? Exactly, exactly. Yeah, honestly, I've heard better things about Android. But Android Studio, I've heard a lot of complaints about. But Xcode, it's not like it's any better. So
Yeah.
we're supposed to be vouching for iOS, and we're just
Oh shit.
not.
Yeah.
Middleman engine. Yep, yep. Oh, got you.
Mm.
But then I don't think you have the same flexibility as you would if you were just to um, code it on Xcode. Like Unity is mostly for games too, right? Like I don't know if you can do normal applications with Unity.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe you can.
Codepath should honestly, we should look into switching into dude Flutter or React Native too. There would be no Android to iOS. It
Ooh,
would just be one class.
yeah, it's definitely a good idea too. Exactly. Yeah. But I've heard like from other people too that even if you're using something like Flutter or React Native or something like that, you still have to do like different things for iOS and Android. So you can't just like have one app and compile it to Android and compile it to iOS. It's like the formatting is not going to be exactly like it's not going to look native basically. So I'm not sure, but yeah, I think we should probably leave the call now. It's 1 o'clock, but thanks for coming. If you have any other questions, Arthur, feel free to DM me or Mingja. But other than that, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye. Have fun, Arthur.